If this self-watering planter is so great, why am I about to destroy it? My first SIP wicking bed was also my most complicated. I wanted an elevated bed that would last. With sturdy 4x4 legs and 2x4 supports, after 14 years, it certainly had. But the planter showed signs of wear, and I realized the design was overly complicated. So, rather than waiting for my planter to fail, I decided to rebuild. This way, I could share which aspects had worked and what needs improvement. This video focuses on building an elevated self-watering raised bed on legs. It won't cover every single aspect of how SIP systems function. Check my earlier videos too, because I'm building on those concepts. My new SIP design is easier to construct and install. It doesn't require board ripping, so no table saws needed. And I'll show an awesome gadget for drilling perfect holes without a drill press. If my original design could last more than 14 years, then this new version should hold up for 20 at a minimum. And although it might seem costly, I'll show how it can pay for itself by the second growing season. To start, what issues did I see with my original elevated wicking bed? The tops of the 4x4 legs were all rotting out. The PVC liner had contracted. Some of the wood under the overflow tube was rotting. Many decking screws had corroded, and the planter itself had sunk into the ground. As I took the bed apart though, I was surprised at how sound it still was. The skinny 1x2 boards were holding up. The 1x6 sideboards were in good condition. All of my stainless hardware was in perfect condition. The corrugated pipes were like new, and they were still empty. After 14 years, they were free of roots and soil, despite my decision to skip a fabric covering. The reservoir was still holding water. Structurally, my SIP was still strong and could have kept going. Even those 4x4 legs were in better shape than I imagined. So what design flaws did I want to fix? Notching the 4x4 legs complicated the construction, and it exposed the inner wood to the elements. When treating lumber, the copper preservation material can only penetrate so deep. This creates a protective shell, but when you cut into that shell, the barrier is compromised. So I planned on doing as little cutting as necessary. Next, I needed to create a better seal where the overflow tube intersects the liner. Years of water seepage had led to wood rotting, but some sort of bulkhead fitting should be able to seal things up. Years ago, I switched from PVC to EPDM liner materials, which stand up better to the elements. I decided to switch from coated decking screws to all stainless hardware for even more longevity. And that planter sinking into the ground problem? My first step was to make a compacted base, which was then overlain with a 12-inch patio block. With a strong, level platform to keep my planter up off the soil, it was now time to focus on the construction of my new SIP garden bed. This new design is comprised of an independent platform. It's basically a miniature deck. Then on top of that, you install a more standard wicking planter. These are the board cuts for the base. All of this should be treated lumber, fastened with stainless steel hardware. In my initial SIP, I used bolts and nuts. Some of those were reused for this project, but this new design relies on lag bolts as well. Technically, you could opt for all lag screws to cut down on the cost. Either way, you'll need to drill pilot holes. My setup uses a combination of 1/4 inch and 3/8 inch bolts. I started with the 2x4 outer rim frame using corner clamps, checking for squareness, before driving in the bolts. Then it was easy to insert the joist supports. These were secured with 3/8 lag bolts, 4 1/2 inches long. I had not pre-drilled the ends of the joist supports, but I didn't have any cracking or splitting issues with my boards. I sorted the 4x4 legs, ensuring the inner corners were all square. I also drilled a hole for each hex bolt. Then I placed each leg for an upside-down assembly. I firmly clamped the legs against the frame. Next, I drove in the 2/4 inch bolts. Then I went in through the pre-drilled hex bolt hole and finished drilling it through into the attached 2x4. From there, it was easy to insert and tighten down the hex bolt, washers, and nut. This straightforward design is much easier to construct while still being very sturdy. With the base in place, I was able to put down the decking boards. There's a gap between each, so using stainless decking screws, I attached the outer boards, then the center one. I marked center and installed the next boards. Then I centered the remaining boards for an even gap. If you don't want a gap, you could reduce the planter length, or you could rip an extra board, but this method saves the table saw step. With the platform completed, the next step is to drop on the sidewall boards. These are the board cuts for my design. I set it up to use as little waste as possible. My elevated SIP is slightly rectangular in size. I designed it that way to fill my space, but you can always tweak your design as you see fit. I checked the board ends for squareness. If they didn't need cut, I tried to keep the ends intact to minimize loss of preservative. Using butt joints, I clamped down and fastened the first row of boards. These were beefy 2x10s and 2x8s, rated for ground contact for enhanced longevity. Once the 2 rows of boards were installed, I tied them together with treated 1x2 vertical slats. The original slats held up so well, I didn't see the need for using thicker boards. At first, I did use a few coated screws in the sideboards, but I love the look of the bolts so much that I eventually switched them out. At this point, I realized something was missing. I still needed to drill a hole for my overflow tube. It might have been easier if I'd done it beforehand, but this provided a unique challenge. For my particular bulkhead fitting setup, I needed a 1 5/8 hole. Drilling that freehand with a spade bit can be tricky to get things nice and straight. But this nifty gadget, which I bought with my own money, was a lifesaver. First, I used it to drill a perfectly perpendicular pilot hole. Then I switched to the spade bit and managed to bore out a nice clean hole. You would think this was done with a proper drill press. The SIP box was done. Now it was time for the liner. Previously, I used a continuous liner, which makes the best separation layer, but it requires a larger overall liner, at least 7 by 7 feet, so it costs just a little more. And when folding the corners, you also have thicker folds to contend with. As an alternate approach, for this SIP, I only needed half of a 5 by 10 liner. I dropped in the liner. Next, it was time to insert the overflow tube. I wanted to try a stapleless install, using tape to hold up the edges. Then I lined the sidewalls with plastic sheeting. I was using up strips of an old vapor barrier. Black 6mm plastic would also work. I folded over and secured the top lip with strips of wood. You could use 1x2 boards for this. I managed to put this all in place without a single staple. To maintain the moisture barrier, I used some liner tape which I had on hand. This sealed things up nicely, but you can skip this step if you're willing to buy a larger continuous liner. I used this unorthodox installation of a bulkhead fitting. Whatever solution you opt for, it's important to seal it up tightly. This way, you avoid premature failure from water damage. As usual, I spaced out my corrugated pipes to create the reservoir. Small spacer blocks helped with consistent gapping for uniform wicking. The inlet for the overflow tube resides within a segment of pipe so it won't ever plug up with soil. As shown in my previous build, I used a 1-inch PVC pipe for the fill tube with a 1/2-inch piece inserted into that. I mixed up a nice wicking substrate from perlite, peat moss, and vermiculite. This is placed in the bottom layer. It's gently packed between each pipe to draw up water from the reservoir. As it's all put in place, I remove those spacer blocks and backfill. For the last step, I refurbished my old SIP potting mix with some fresh stuff before refilling the rest of the soil in the planter. Through the season, the plants had done pretty well, but this might seem like a very costly way to grow a salad. In truth, it is. So I want to demonstrate how you can use an SIP like this to actually make you money, not just as an expensive hobby. For example, based on my local prices over the last year, the material cost for this planter can be a little over $400. How long would it take just so you could break even? If you only want to grow lettuce and celery, it might take a while. But with a little strategy, you could see a payoff within 2 years. I've been doing cost analyses for years now. From my experience, broccoli can grow really well in SIPs. In a 4-foot by 4-foot SIP, you could fit 9 plants. By averaging my actual yields, that translates into $90 before the start of summer. Then, as a successive crop, 4 zucchini plants could yield $200 worth of fruit. Or instead, an SIP this size could support 12 pepper plants. Looking at the cost of bell peppers, and my average harvest, that's $240 in one season. So really, by the end of the second growing season, someone could realistically grow $500 worth of food. I'm not mentioning tomatoes, because this planter is pretty high up already. In my standard SIP, the plants exceed 6 feet tall. In a good season, I've had 2 plants covering 4 square feet, which yielded 133 pounds of fruit. At $3 per pound, that's $400 right there. Even if money is tight, wicking systems can be a worthwhile investment. But it's important to consider that some vegetables are much more profitable on a square foot basis. This can help you to save the most money in your food budget. I hope this info helped. Thanks for watching, and as always, I'd like to wish you happy gardening.